Andrew Collins kissed my cheek as the conference room applauded. The projector behind me still showed my name in bold letters when his phone vibrated on the table between us. I saw the screen light up before he did. A message preview slid across it, sharp and cruel. "I can't believe you're marrying her tomorrow." My smile stayed frozen, as if it belonged to someone else. My hands tightened around the edge of the table. This was my promotion meeting. My moment. Executives, coworkers, cameras. And my fiance's secret was sitting in plain sight. Andrew glanced at the phone, flipped it face down, and squeezed my knee beneath the table like a warning. "Proud of you," he whispered, still smiling for the room. "Tomorrow." The word rang louder than the applause. Not someday. Not eventually. Tomorrow meant plans, promises, another life running parallel to mine. I nodded when the director spoke to me. I thanked people. I shook hands. Inside, something cracked open slowly, quietly, so no one else could hear it. This betrayal wasn't private. It wasn't accidental. It was happening in public, during the one moment that was supposed to be mine. This is the story of how my fiancé carried on a secret relationship while planning our wedding, and how he expected the wedding to shift sides. My name is Olivia Stone. I couldn't breathe properly as I left the conference room. The hum of fluorescent lights, the polite clapping, the smiles, they all blurred. Andrew walked beside me, his hand brushing mine occasionally, pretending normalcy. Pretending nothing had happened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip his face off. But I swallowed it. I had to. For now. In the elevator, his phone buzzed again. He ignored it, but my eyes had already caught the name. Lauren. That was her. Lauren. The betrayal didn't feel like a punch. It was a slow, crawling poison. Every plan we'd made, every invitation, every bridal fitting, every late-night conversation about flowers and cakes, she had been there. Invisible, under the radar, while I trusted him with my heart. I felt my knuckles whiten around the strap of my bag. The floor beneath me seemed to tilt. I imagined every coworker seeing me collapse, the spotlight of success turning into a spotlight of humiliation. I wanted to walk out, leave him there, leave everything behind. But my pride clenched my jaw tight. I would not cry. Not in public. Not yet. Later at home, I locked the door behind me and sank to the floor. Phone in hand, I scrolled. Pictures. Messages. Laughs I wasn't invited to. Every secret he had built. Every lie he had fed me, revealed in harsh light. And that's when I knew I wouldn't just survive this. I would make sure he lost more than I ever could. Andrew acted normal that night, which made everything worse. He cooked dinner, asked about my meeting, kissed my temple like muscle memory. I watched him the way you watch a stranger wearing someone you love. When he showered, I opened his laptop. My hands were steady now. Fear had burned off, leaving focus. His email was still logged in. So was his calendar. There it was. Repeating entries, carefully labeled as work. Dinners. Weekends. Hotel confirmations forwarded and archived. A second life color-coded blue. I didn't rush. I photographed screens. I saved files. I wrote dates in a notebook, neat and small. Control felt better than crying. He came out wrapped in a towel, smiling. "You're quiet," he said. "Just tired." I answered, and it wasn't a lie. Later, when he slept, his phone buzzed again. I didn't flinch this time. I unlocked it and read everything from the beginning. Promises. Complaints about me. Plans after the wedding. After. That word hardened something inside my chest. By dawn, I had a folder, a timeline and a rule. I would not confront him. Not yet. If Andrew wanted a wedding, he would have one. He just wouldn't be the only one telling the truth. I breathed, planned, waited, and chose patience over panic, knowing time would expose him fully soon. The days that followed, Andrew acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed me good morning, joked about flowers, and asked if I wanted champagne while picking out napkins. Every small gesture was an act of deception, and every smile he offered became a weapon against my peace. I played my part, silently, deliberately. I called friends, casually mentioned wedding ideas, and noted every reaction. The way he laughed at their suggestions, the way his jaw tightened when I leaned on someone else for advice, it all told me what he wanted to hide. Then came the invitation delivery day. He handed envelopes with his usual charm, unaware I had already cross-checked addresses, recipients, and RSVPs. The lies, the double dates, the secret dinners, they all added weight to the smile I forced at him. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the invitations spread across the table. I photographed every detail, filed every note, and planned contingencies. I realized revenge wasn't about confrontation, it was about control, precision, and letting consequences unfold naturally. My phone buzzed. A notification from an unknown number. We need to talk about Andrew. My heart skipped. The thread hinted at someone else, someone patient, observant, a mirror to my suspicion. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I archived, documented, and waited. Andrew, oblivious, slept in the next room. I knew the first twist was coming, and when it did, it would hit harder than any outburst. I had the map, I just needed the timing. The next morning, Andrew suggested we visit the venue together. He wore that confident smile, the one that convinced everyone he was flawless. I nodded, quietly taking notes on every interaction, every whisper of his charm, and every detail he overlooked. Each misstep, however small, was a thread I could pull later. At the venue, I noticed the staff's subtle hesitation around him. A florist whispered something to me as he walked by. I smiled politely, pretending ignorance, but filed it mentally. Andrew would never suspect that the smallest observations could unravel him. We walked through the banquet hall, discussing table placements and lighting. I feigned excitement, letting him bask in control, while my mind mapped every exit, every potential witness, and every opportunity for the truth to surface. I had become a silent predator, calculating, patient, and precise. Afterward, Andrew suggested a dinner with his friends, his private circle. I agreed but proposed a different restaurant. The decision was small, seemingly insignificant, but it gave me leverage. I captured every interaction, every sly glance, every slip of his guard. The data would become proof, patience converted into strategy. Later that evening, alone in our apartment, I poured a glass of wine, my fingers tightening around it. A smile crept across my face, quiet but sharp. Andrew thought he was in control, but the first real crack in his perfect world was already forming. I just had to wait. The next morning, I woke to Andrew's texts, casual and charming as if nothing had happened. "Can't wait to see you tonight," one read. I stared at my phone, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He had no idea how much I already knew. I didn't reply. Silence was my weapon now. Work was a blur, but I stayed sharp, observing every conversation, every interaction. Andrew had slipped a small detail the night before, something only someone close could notice. My mind circled it like a predator honing in on prey. I traced his digital footprint subtly, avoiding any hint of suspicion. The web of deceit he thought was hidden was already unraveling, thread by thread. By noon, I had a meeting scheduled under the guise of wedding planning with one of Andrew's colleagues. I asked precise questions, steering conversations to reveal Andrew's inconsistencies. Each answer, each evasive glance added to the puzzle. I scribbled notes in my planner, methodical, careful, organized. No one suspected I was mapping the betrayal in real time. Later, at the florist's, Andrew flirted with the idea of another wedding location he'd secretly discussed with someone else. My hands tightened around the bouquet I was holding, forcing a polite smile. My heart raced, not with panic, but with controlled fire. I was no longer naive. Each revelation fueled the strategy forming in my mind. That night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering. Andrew's smile haunted me on a screen. I whispered to myself, quiet and firm, "He won't see this coming." The following morning, I arrived at the boutique early, pretending to be cheerful as Andrew joined me with his usual easy charm. "Excited for tonight?" he asked, oblivious to the storm already brewing behind my eyes. I nodded, masking every flicker of suspicion. Inside, the mirror reflected a woman smiling politely while plotting quietly. That reflection was no longer naive Olivia. It was calculated, patient, and sharp. While Andrew chatted about guest lists and floral arrangements, I excused myself to inspect the invitations. Under the guise of checking fonts and colors, I noticed subtle discrepancies, dates crossed out, names scribbled over, hints of another plan. My stomach twisted. He had been lying, planning, hiding something enormous right under my nose. My mind raced, but my expression remained calm, disarming. I returned to Andrew with a drink in hand, letting him lead the conversation while I listened to every word. Small clues slipped. A name mentioned in passing, a location that didn't match our plans, a laugh that didn't include me. Each piece fit together, forming a picture that I had to verify before moving. Patience was key. Impulses would ruin everything. That evening, alone in my apartment, I spread my notes across the dining table, connecting dots with a precision that made my pulse steady. By the time Andrew sent his last flirty text, I was ready. Not to confront. Not yet. To observe, to plan, and to take control. The night of the rehearsal dinner, I walked in with a smile that hid everything. Andrew spotted me immediately, his face lighting up with that overconfident grin that used to make my knees weak. Tonight, that grin made me furious. I let him approach, let him brush my hand in public, laughing at jokes that no longer landed. Every step I took was measured, every movement precise. The room buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses. Friends, family, and colleagues were gathered, oblivious to the storm about to unfold. Andrew leaned in, whispering, "I've got everything handled. You don't need to worry." His words dripped with ownership, as if the wedding, and by extension me, was his to command. My smile didn't falter. I simply sipped my drink, letting the alcohol settle and my thoughts sharpen. As he excused himself to greet a vendor, I noticed it, an unguarded phone left on the bar. His messages were open, a casual slip that revealed hours of text with someone else, someone I hadn't expected. My heart stuttered, then steadied. Rage bubbled under the surface, but I didn't move. I had a choice: explode and ruin everything, or gather evidence, craft strategy, and dismantle him quietly. Tonight, I would observe, and the first cracks would begin. By the time the night ended, I had names, locations, and timestamps carefully stored in my mind. Andrew thought he was untouchable. He had no idea the game had already shifted. The next morning, I woke before Andrew, my mind replaying every detail from last night. The messages, the casual laughter, the way he believed no one could see through his lies. It made my stomach twist. But I refused panic. I wasn't going to cry over him. Not now. Not ever. I had a plan forming, and every move would be deliberate. I poured coffee and sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. Carefully, I photographed each message thread. Screenshots, timestamps, and small details, evidence he could never deny. Each file was labeled, organized, ready. My pulse steadied as I thought of the wedding. All the plans, the flowers, the guests, he had assumed it was a stage. He had no idea the spotlight would shift. Later, I met with my wedding planner under the guise of checking the seating chart. "Olivia, everything's perfect," she said, unaware of my hidden agenda. I smiled, nodding, but in my mind, I was recalibrating every aspect of the ceremony. If Andrew wanted to claim control publicly, he'd have to face the truth quietly, methodically. By noon, I had mapped out the day of the wedding. Each vendor, each announcement, each moment had a counter, small, precise, and entirely my own. Andrew thought he was orchestrating the perfect day. He didn't know the undercurrent of his own undoing was already set in motion. This wasn't impulsive. This was strategic. By the time he realized, the game would be over, and I would still be standing, untouched, untouchable. Andrew woke late, rubbing his eyes like nothing had changed. He had no idea I was already steps ahead. His casual smile greeted me in the mirror that morning, oblivious to the storm I was quietly assembling. I returned the smile, small and polite, hiding the fire that had ignited inside me. I checked the guest list again, pretending to review minor details. Each name, each connection, each expectation became a lever. I noted those who knew him too well, those who trusted him blindly. They would witness the truth eventually. Carefully, quietly. My pulse steadied as I imagined the ripple of disbelief spreading through the crowd. Andrew chatted about last-minute changes to the ceremony, oblivious. "Olivia, I was thinking we could," he began. I nodded, interrupting with a soft, "Of course." But inside, every word he spoke was another thread weaving his own trap. Later, I slipped away to my office, my sanctuary. Emails, confirmations, and contracts became tools, all pointing to Andrew's hidden missteps. I reviewed payments, timelines, and surprises, small details he'd assumed no one would notice. By the afternoon, I was ready. Every small inconsistency was documented, every shadow of deception captured. I imagined his face when the first hint of exposure would hit, a blend of shock, anger, disbelief. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to execute every move silently, letting his own arrogance destroy the illusion he had built. The wedding day was still days away, but the chessboard was already set. The morning of the rehearsal, I arrived early, pretending calm while my mind raced. Every detail Andrew had overlooked became ammunition. I carried the schedule, rehearsals notes, and vendor confirmations like weapons, ready to wield them when the time was right. He assumed I was oblivious, distracted, waiting for him to lead. How little he understood me. I watched him interact with the coordinator, laughing, charming, completely unaware that the truth was quietly creeping closer. Each time he leaned on a false smile, each time he joked about the perfect wedding, I felt a rush of anticipation. Andrew had built a facade so delicate it only needed the faintest pressure to crack. Later, during the final run-through, I casually whispered reminders to vendors about seating, payments, and special requests Andrew had promised but never delivered. I saw his brow furrow, subtle yet unmistakable, as confusion flickered across his face. Not yet panic, just the seed. I made sure everyone he trusted was in earshot, carefully planting doubt without speaking a single accusation. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. I wasn't just a victim. I was an architect, and the first dominoes were already tilting. By the time he realized some tasks were perfectly handled, tasks he thought he controlled, I would have captured every slip, every lie, every hidden text. And when the right moment came, the room that adored him would see him as he truly was. I smiled quietly. Today, the game officially began. The tension in the air was nearly tangible when the bridesmaids arrived. I greeted them warmly, but my mind was elsewhere, running through every conversation, every slip Andrew had made, every secret message I had uncovered. I carried my calm like armor, but inside anger simmered. Every laugh he shared with someone else felt like betrayal, and I kept it hidden behind a controlled smile. Andrew breezed in, charming everyone, unaware I had already read his emails, memorized his alibis, and traced his secret movements. He assumed I was oblivious, the perfect fiancé, still believing love blinded me. But love wasn't in the equation anymore. I had clarity. As the rehearsal began, I subtly adjusted the seating chart, swapping a few critical roles. I watched Andrew notice small changes but dismiss them. Vendors whispered questions he hadn't prepared for. I could see the first cracks forming. Later, I intercepted a message from his hidden phone, proof of text to her, asking about a weekend getaway. I saved it, screenshot, and copied it into a secure folder. One day, Andrew would understand the extent of my patience. One day, everyone would. For now, I played the perfect fiancé, graceful, composed, smiling at his jokes, nodding at his instructions. Each step was calculated, each gesture deliberate. The rehearsal ended. Andrew beamed at the crowd, unaware that the perfect wedding he imagined was already subtly shifting, that control was quietly slipping through his fingers. I took a deep breath. The game was far from over. That night, I sat alone in the suite, reviewing the wedding itinerary Andrew had crafted with such pride. Every vendor contact, every timeline, every subtle detail he thought gave him control, I now held it all in my hands. The irony wasn't lost on me. He believed he was the master of our wedding, but I was quietly rewriting the narrative. My phone buzzed. Another message from her, masked with a fake name. I opened it carefully, every word confirming what I already knew. Andrew had been planning this double life for months, and the audacity made my blood boil. Yet I didn't react. Not yet. Impulse had never been my ally. Strategy was. I drafted a folder labeled Wedding Secrets on my laptop, encrypting every piece of evidence. Texts, emails, receipts, hidden bookings, her photos. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. This was chess, not checkers. Every move he had made unknowingly positioned him closer to defeat. The next morning, rehearsal dinner chaos began subtly. Vendors sent updates I hadn't expected. Andrew's messages to her had left instructions that conflicted with the wedding plan. I observed quietly, letting small mistakes accumulate, letting tension grow. By the end of the evening, Andrew's charming composure had small cracks, questions he couldn't answer, vendors confused, subtle whispers around him. I sipped my champagne, pretending innocence, but inside, satisfaction bloomed. For the first time, I felt the power shifting. The wedding was no longer entirely his to control. The game had just begun. The next morning, Andrew was already in a panic. He walked into the kitchen, his usual confident stride replaced with hesitation. I poured myself coffee, keeping my expression neutral, letting him stew in the uncertainty he didn't yet understand. "You seem tense," I said lightly, voice calm, controlled. His jaw tightened. He glanced at the laptop, noting nothing unusual. "Just finalizing details," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. I knew where his attention would go, checking the timeline, confirming the rehearsal dinner details. Perfect! I'd planted subtle contradictions the night before. Every call he made, every frantic question he asked, revealed just how deeply his secret life was starting to crumble under my quiet observation. By noon, whispers from vendors reached me, small complaints, conflicting instructions he'd sent her. His panic was palpable even from a distance. He thought he was juggling a secret, but he was slowly exposing it to the very people he relied on. I kept my composure, sipping my coffee and pretending oblivion, but inside my mind raced. Every error was fuel. Every cracked smile, every misstep, every minor embarrassment, I noted it all. The wedding, the perfect facade he had built, was starting to show fractures. And I was not reacting. I was orchestrating. For the first time, I realized just how powerless he had become in this situation, and a quiet thrill ran through me. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about taking back control. By late afternoon, Andrew's nerves had become almost tangible. I watched from the balcony as he paced back and forth in the garden, phone pressed to his ear, voice clipped and urgent. I pretended to admire the flowers, casual, indifferent, while he unraveled before me without realizing it. The first real crack appeared when Emily, the woman he'd been seeing in secret, unexpectedly showed up at the dress fitting he had scheduled. She wasn't supposed to be there. He froze when he saw her, panic flashing across his features. I stayed silent inside the fitting room, pretending I had no idea, but every movement I made was intentional, every breath measured. Emily's presence wasn't meant to be public, but she made it that way. I noticed her smirk, the way she thought she had power over him. He stammered, flustered, trying to explain her presence while keeping up appearances. Everyone watching was confused, whispers beginning to circulate. I had waited for this moment. Months of meticulous observation and quiet patience led to a single point of exposure. Andrew had assumed I'd remain oblivious, that his two lives could coexist without collision. He hadn't counted on me being calm, strategic, or aware. And now, every lie, every betrayal, every secret meeting was about to be revealed, not with words from me, but through his own mistakes. The wedding he thought he controlled was shifting beneath him, and I was silently directing the chaos. I stayed quiet as Emily's laughter echoed in the fitting room corridor. Andrew's face had drained of color, his jaw clenched like he was trying to bite back panic. I watched him try to negotiate, fumbling through words, explanations that made no sense even to him. I could almost hear the crumble of the carefully constructed persona he wore around everyone. It wasn't just the exposure, it was the timing. I had subtly arranged for key family members to arrive early for the dress fitting, and now they were witnesses. My mother's sharp eyes narrowed, not in admiration, but in clear disapproval. My father stiffened, caught in the awkward tension, glancing between Andrew and Emily, sensing the betrayal without needing any explanation. I remained calm, serene even. Every inch of my body betrayed nothing. But inside, my pulse raced, not with fear, but with satisfaction. Months of careful surveillance, subtle questioning, and small tests of Andrew's honesty had built to this. He turned toward me, pleading in a way that made his arrogance feel small, impotent. "Olivia, this isn't what it looks like." I shook my head slowly, letting the silence speak louder than any words. You underestimated me, I said softly, the room feeling smaller, tighter. And now, everyone sees exactly who you are. Andrew swallowed, defeated, realizing that control had slipped through his fingers. And I, for the first time, felt the power shift firmly into my hands. The wedding planner approached, her clipboard trembling slightly as she took in the tense scene. Is everything okay? She asked, voice hesitant, glancing between Andrew and me. I smiled politely, the kind of smile that disarmed while masking a storm inside. Everything is perfect, I said, letting the words land like a stone. Andrew's shoulders sagged, a mix of humiliation and panic flickering across his face. He knew everyone had seen Emily there, laughing, touching, and clearly more than a friend. My family's eyes were sharp, dissecting, full of questions that Andrew couldn't answer. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father shifted uncomfortably, clearly wrestling with the sudden revelation. I felt the satisfaction of years of planning crystallize into a single moment. Months of small tests, casual mentions of Emily in conversation, observing Andrew's reactions, all led here. The puzzle had completed itself, exposing him entirely. Emily whispered, "Are you sure you want me to stay?" I nodded. Yes. Let him see everything. Let him feel what it's like when the truth hits. Andrew finally spoke, voice low and cracking. "Olivia, please." I held up my hand. "No more lies. No more secrets. You chose this life, and now everyone sees it, including me." The room seemed to shrink around him, the weight of exposure pressing down. And in that suffocating moment, I realized Andrew's arrogance had built the trap, and I was simply letting gravity do its work. Andrew's face drained of color as whispers ricocheted around the room. Every guest who had believed in the fairy tale of our engagement now glanced between him and Emily, curiosity sharp as knives. I felt no guilt, only clarity. This was the consequence of his duplicity, executed flawlessly through months of careful observation and quiet manipulation. Emily stepped closer, her smile calm but knowing. "You didn't expect me here," she said softly, loud enough for Andrew to hear. His eyes darted between us, desperation mixing with disbelief. The image of the perfect wedding he had envisioned, me smiling, him triumphant, everyone in awe, was crumbling in real time. I took a deep breath, letting my presence command the space. "Andrew," I said, voice steady, "do you understand now? The trust you destroyed can't be rebuilt overnight. Not here. Not ever." My family watched, stunned but silently approving my composure. They saw him exposed, and though no one intervened, the tension shifted to my favor. For the first time, I felt the power of my own patience, each calculated move solidifying. He opened his mouth, stammered, tried to reach me, but the moment had passed. Every eye in the room bore into him like a spotlight. He wasn't the charming, confident man he had presented himself to be. He was vulnerable, caught, and wholly unprepared. And in that instant, I realized the wedding, the facade, the celebration, they had all shifted sides. Andrew wasn't winning. He was losing, spectacularly, in front of everyone who mattered. The room felt smaller somehow, the air heavier. Andrew's hands trembled as he tried to salvage some fragment of dignity, but it was gone. Each whispered glance, each hesitant cough from the guests, felt like a drumbeat marking his downfall. I stayed poised, my fingers lightly brushing the folds of my dress, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. Emily moved to my side, subtle, supportive, almost like an ally I had chosen, not a threat. "You did well," she whispered. Her presence was both comforting and a quiet reminder of the betrayal that had led us here. Andrew's expression flickered between fury and panic. He realized he had underestimated me and underestimated the ripple effect of his lies. I let the silence linger, let the tension press against him. He built his fantasy wedding on deceit, and now the truth had invaded, sharp and unavoidable. My family watched intently, a silent jury weighing each misstep, each concealed conversation finally brought to light. Andrew tried to speak again. "Olivia, wait!" His voice faltered. No one intervened. The guest's attention was on him, but not in admiration. This was spectacle, judgment, the culmination of months of secrecy exposed in a single, undeniable moment. I straightened, shoulders back, chin lifted. "No, Andrew. There's nothing left to fix. Not tonight, not ever. The words echoed, calm but final. The shift was complete. My wedding, meant to celebrate our union, had transformed into his reckoning. And I watched, detached but victorious, as the man I once loved unraveled. The next morning, the air smelled of rain and something sharper anticipation. Andrew hadn't left. He lingered in the suite, pacing like a predator caught in a trap, muttering under his breath, trying to piece together his fractured plan. I sipped coffee calmly, the cup warm between my hands, savoring the simple act of normalcy. Emily joined me, carrying a stack of envelopes. "These arrived for you," she said quietly, placing them on the table. Wedding invitations, vendor contracts, gifts, small reminders of the life we've been planning. He thought he could erase me with lies, but here it all was, tangible proof of my foresight, my preparation, my independence. Andrew stopped mid-step, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" His voice had lost its usual arrogance, replaced with a raw edge of fear. "I'm taking control," I said softly, almost too quiet to hear, but it landed where it needed. My words didn't need to scream, their weight was enough. Every vendor contract, every scheduled appointment, every guest list detail, he had assumed I would bend, compromise, forgive. He hadn't counted on me, standing my ground. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. The mask of charm and control had crumbled, revealing a man trapped by his own arrogance. I felt no joy in seeing him falter, only clarity. I glanced at Emily. Let's finish what he tried to hide. Let's reveal everything. The plan wasn't impulsive. It was methodical. The countdown had begun. That evening, I walked into the bridal boutique, heels clicking against the marble floor. Andrew had assumed I'd stay silent, assumed I'd cling to appearances. He didn't realize I had allies, vendors, friends, and even family members who had quietly noticed inconsistencies were waiting. Their eyes flicked to me with subtle acknowledgement, respect in their glances. The boutique manager, Carla, handed me a folder. "These came from Andrew's files," she whispered. "Emails, messages, confirmations he never shared with you." I opened it slowly, letting the weight of his betrayal hit again, savoring the sting. It was real, undeniable. I felt a surge of control. 4 months, Andrew had carried on a secret relationship with someone else, believing I'd remain oblivious while we planned our wedding. Each lie, each concealed meeting, each fabricated excuse now lay bare before me, every detail documented and time-stamped. I set the folder on the counter and looked directly at the boutique staff. Everything we planned together? He thought he could claim my work, my taste, my effort, as if I were powerless. That ends tonight. Andrew had texted me 100 times that day, panic-lacing each message, but I ignored him. Silence was my weapon. By the time the night ended, key figures had spoken discreetly, reaffirming loyalty not to him but to truth. Andrew's web of deceit was unraveling, and I was ready to step out of the shadows and into the light. The next morning, I woke to a new sense of clarity. Andrew's messages had stopped, at least temporarily, but the tension was palpable. I didn't respond. I let him stew in uncertainty. Every second of his silence was a small victory. I spent the day organizing the evidence I'd gathered, the screenshots, emails, and receipts, layering them carefully into a timeline. Each piece was a testament to his deceit, a record I could use if necessary. I didn't plan on confrontation, only undeniable truth. By mid-afternoon, I arrived at the wedding venue, ostensibly for final arrangements. The staff greeted me warmly. They'd been briefed, subtly, without Andrew knowing. I noticed the subtle glances, the unspoken acknowledgement that I was no longer alone in this. Andrew arrived, as expected, flashing his charming smile, oblivious to the changes in the room. He assumed control, speaking loudly, giving orders. But I watched him carefully, silent, steady, my heart controlled, my mind sharper than ever. Then came the first ripple. One of the vendors subtly corrected him on a critical detail. Another gently contradicted his timeline. Confusion flickered across his face, quickly replaced by defensiveness. The more he tried to dominate, the more the room quietly aligned with me. By the time the rehearsal ended, Andrew was visibly rattled. He glanced at me once, panic in his eyes. I smiled faintly, a small curve of triumph. I wasn't just preparing to expose him. I was already winning. The morning of the wedding arrived with deceptive calm. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, but inside me, a storm raged quietly. Andrew didn't know I had anticipated every move, every lie. Every moment of charm he planned for others had been countered, recorded, and stored. I walked through the venue before guests arrived, inspecting details. Every chair, every floral arrangement, every guest list entry had been subtly adjusted. Nothing obvious, nothing overt, but enough to shift the energy of the room. I was invisible, yet omnipresent. When the guests began to arrive, whispers floated in the air. People I barely knew gave me knowing looks. Andrew, oblivious, continued with rehearsed speeches, charming smiles, handshakes. He had no idea the subtle currents were against him. Then it happened. A bridesmaid, someone Andrew had assumed was loyal, leaned over and quietly corrected him, pointing out the mix-up with the seating chart. He blinked, momentarily flustered. Another vendor stepped forward, gently informing him of an overlooked detail in the catering schedule. Confusion began to creep into his posture, his gestures faltering. I stood back, letting him crumble under the weight of minor inconveniences, each amplified by his own arrogance. Guests began noticing. The charm faltered, the facade cracked. I caught his eye briefly, holding his gaze. For the first time, he realized the room wasn't his anymore. He had lost control, and it had begun quietly, methodically, beautifully. The ceremony began, and Andrew's panic grew beneath his polished exterior. His smiles were tighter, his voice sharper, as if trying to reclaim control that had quietly slipped from his grasp. I stayed in the background, observing, my pulse steady, my mind razor-sharp. Every camera angle, every social media post, every whisper among guests had been subtly guided to expose cracks he could not repair. During the vows, his words stumbled. A line he had memorized flawlessly faltered, and a nervous glance betrayed the tension. I had ensured the officiant mispronounced a key phrase he had insisted on correcting, just enough to shake his confidence. Guests exchanged glances, noticing the tiny inconsistencies, the subtle unraveling. Whispers grew louder. Andrew's carefully curated image began to crumble, piece by piece. When it came time for the ring exchange, I made a small adjustment, a misplaced placement of his cufflink, a minor wardrobe mishap that drew attention. Laughter rippled quietly through the crowd, not cruel, just enough to tilt the scale. I stepped forward, took his hand, and smiled, a soft, controlled smile. The power had shifted completely. He could no longer hide behind charm or manipulation. Every attempt to dominate, to control, was undone by his own arrogance, magnified by careful orchestration. By the time the ceremony concluded, Andrew's confidence had evaporated. Guests whispered, eyes flicking between us. For the first time, he realized he was no longer the center of attention. His carefully constructed world had turned, and I stood at its axis. The reception began, and the shift was undeniable. Guests who had once admired Andrew now lingered near me, offering congratulations, curious smiles, subtle nods of recognition. Every conversation he attempted to start faltered, cut short by polite interruptions or diverted attention. His arrogance, once magnetic, now seemed fragile, brittle under scrutiny. I moved through the crowd like water, graceful but purposeful. Every detail, the decorations, the seating, even the music, had been subtly arranged to highlight my control, my composure. Andrew tried to reclaim moments, the first dance, the toast, the champagne. But each attempt felt forced, hollow. The power of the wedding had shifted irrevocably. By the end of the night, Andrew's whispers turned to silent frustration. He realized what I had orchestrated, the slow unveiling of his betrayal in a space meant to celebrate love, trust, and unity. His secret relationship had become irrelevant, overshadowed by his collapse under his own weight. I stepped outside for a moment, the cool night air brushing against my face. Relief, pride, and liberation intertwined. I had not humiliated him recklessly, nor had I needed to. I had let truth, patience, and strategy do the work. I would leave that night as Olivia Stone, whole, untouchable, and free. Andrew Collins had lost more than control. He had lost the respect, admiration, and trust of everyone around him. Some victories are quiet, methodical, and irreversible. Mine was one of them. I smiled, head held high, knowing my worth had been reclaimed, and nothing, no betrayal, no arrogance, could ever take it again.